Welcome to the Inner Court Show. I'm your host, Mr. B. You are joining us live today. There's breaking news that the Supreme Court just struck down Trump's ability to impose sweeping tariffs on other nations. This is major because this is going to affect pretty much a lot of Trump's policy right now. And there's deals currently in the works. But let's go ahead and take a look at what is actually happening
into this equation to rebalance the powers between Congress and the executive branch.
Very interesting. Like we've been telling everyone, Major, stick around if you're able to. Let's bring in Market Watch reporter Joy Wiltermuth. So let's talk about reaction from markets, reaction from small businesses.
Wow.
Markets have been waiting for this decision for months, months. And the anticipation was that, it would go against President Trump. You can look at the betting markets, Wall Street, everybody was waiting for, based on oral arguments, that it could go against him. So businesses, as we've already talked about, have already sort of jumped the gun and filed a suit to reclaim refunds. So that's one thing. A lot of the retailers, the big retailers that we know, if they get those back, it's going to be a messy process. President Trump has said this will be a whole huge mess if this goes against me. So the process of how that happens and when it happens.
Retailers like?
Costco sort of, was early sort of leading this, and, other major retailers that have, obviously trade and shipping from China, goods from China has been a major part of their business for a very long time. So the mechanism of how there are refunds will be important. It could be a stimulus. Everybody's been talking about the one big beautiful bill. Expect the stimulus of that to sort of help and support the market. So a rebate would be another form of stimulus for the market. The big thing to watch also will be the bond market, because the bond market, while nobody on Wall Street really loved the tariffs, the bond market did like that revenue. There were projections of tariff revenue under, the tariffs in place would be somewhere over, $300 billion this year potentially. If that's in flux, in question now, which it is, which tariffs will be reapplied and how, we don't know where that revenue is going to be. That revenue has helped keep an anchor on long-term rates. So that goes back to mortgage rates, lending for the real economy. So there'll be a lot more wait and see mode to see how that happens and see what tariffs are reapplied in different ways and how long. But the other big issue here is, and that Wall Street's been talking about, is the affordability push. We're heading into the midterm elections. Affordability has been a big facet of what the Trump administration has been talking about. Well, one way to very easily relieve some of that pressure is to maybe slow roll tariffs back on. Maybe don't go full on and try to go through all the channels and ram it through. Because if your agenda is really to make things more affordable, well, tariffs don't help.
All right, Joy, stand by. Let's bring in congressional correspondent Nicole Killian, who's joining us now. So, Nicole, what's really interesting about this is we've seen a Republican-controlled Congress that has been in lockstep with the President of the United States in almost every capacity. Exactly. And so the question becomes, as the court has stated, if the Congress wanted to delegate its responsibility as defined by that clause that we pointed out earlier in the Constitution, they absolutely could. They clearly have not. The question, of course, for you then is, how are members of Congress reacting? Will we see members of Congress lamenting the fact that the President of the United States does not have the authority to usurp their powers?
Yeah, well, right now we're seeing quite a bit of reaction, particularly among congressional Democrats who have railed against these tariffs for some time now. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer just out with this statement that we obtained, calling it a win for the wallets of every American consumer. Also going on to say that we have said from day one, a president cannot ignore Congress and unilaterally slap tariffs on Americans. That overreach failed. However, we have also heard, for instance, from other Senate Democrats like Elizabeth Warren, who, while hailing this decision, also said that just this ruling alone can't undo the damage that these tariffs have already had, especially on small businesses. So she did raise that point, that it's really important to make some of these impacted businesses right that have kind of been in limbo in light of the president's tariff policies. And I would also point out, of course, we just saw recently, before Congress went on recess, and I think Major touched on this just a hair, we did see Congress try to reassert its authority with respect to tariffs in a vote in the House that was successful. It was a vote that was forced by Congressman Greg Meeks, but this was to basically a resolution of disapproval against the president's tariffs against Canada, which ultimately was successful, received bipartisan support, and there was some question on whether or not that would move forward in the Senate. But obviously, there have been these attempts, though, previously, where the House in particular has tried to squash those efforts. So the fact that it was able to clear the House just a week or two ago was significant. So Congress has tried to win and where it could to try to reassert its authority. But
I would say it's like having another producer in the room that knows exactly what you're.
Okay, if you were just joining us, we are just now breaking the news that President Trump's tariffs ability was just struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court. Unfortunately, they are not granting him the right to apply tariffs to any and everybody that he wills to put a tariff on. So as of, I guess, today, his tariffs is null and void, and it means that they're not going to have to start unwinding. There's companies suing to recoup losses. Now what they're saying is that apparently President Trump needs to actually get permission from Congress, because that's really Congress's role to assign that authority over to the president. So really and truly, if Trump wants to be smart and get ahead of this, it seems like what he would have to do is get the Republican can control Congress to temporarily grant him, for the duration of his term, the right to implement tariffs in the manner that he has. That's the one way he then falls in compliance with the law. So he just has to get his party together and get them to vote on a resolution that allows him to essentially take their authority to implement the tariffs. So let's go ahead and kind of break the news from different news outlets, but this is what I'm hearing.
Donald Trump, his sweeping global tariff improved.
Wow.
A massive setback to U.S. President Donald Trump. His sweeping global tariffs have been struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court. The verdict came just a short while back. 6 out of 9 judges ruled that Trump's tariffs are illegal. 6 judges out of 9 said the tariffs are illegal. Only 3 judges sided with the U.S. president. It is undoubtedly the biggest blow to the Trump presidency, one that basically undoes months of threats, negotiations, and deals. It's hard to overstate how crucial this verdict is, not just for the U.S., but for the whole world, because Donald Trump pinned his entire policy on these tariffs, both his foreign policy and domestic policy. It was all based on the tariffs. He announced the tariffs in April last year, a baseline of 10% plus varying rates for each country. Trump claimed that these tariffs would wipe out the U.S. trade deficit. He also said that they would bring back jobs to America, but even then experts were skeptical. According to U.S. law, you need approval from the U.S. Congress to impose sweeping tariffs. You need congressional approval. But Trump did not go through the U.S. Congress, that's the American parliament. He did not follow the process. Instead, he used an old emergency law, a law from the 1970s. That's when businesses and US states sued the White House. They claim that Trump's tariffs were illegal. And today, the US Supreme Court has sided with them. It has agreed, it has ruled that the tariffs were indeed illegal. Now, despite this verdict, 3 questions remain. 1, will the Trump administration use different rules to reimpose the tariffs? Will the tariffs really go away, or will Trump find another way? The White House, in fact, has been preparing for this eventuality, so a reimposition of tariffs cannot be ruled out. That's the first thing to note. Secondly, what happens to the...
I tried a ton of AI work tools. Then I tried Monday.com. Game over. Monday.com is super easy.
So far, will that money be refunded? The top court has left that matter to the lower courts in America. So that's still to be figured out. And finally, what happens to the trade deals? Will countries renegotiate, or will they stick to the old agreements? These are the 3 questions to watch out for. We're still waiting for more details. Earlier today, President Trump was on a call with American governors. Reports say he called the Supreme Court's decision a disgrace. I'm sure a much longer Truth Social post is on its way, because, like I said, this is a major setback for him. As recently as yesterday, Trump was making an attempt to defend his trade policy. Listen to what he wrote, and I'm quoting. The United States trade deficit has been reduced by 78% because of the tariffs being charged to other companies and countries. It will go into positive territory during this year. This is what Trump posted yesterday. He was talking about trade deficit. What is a deficit? When you import more than you export, you have a deficit. Say your imports are $100 billion, your exports are $50 billion, then your deficit is $50 billion. Basically, the difference between imports and exports, that's a deficit. In recent decades, the US has always run a trade deficit. They've always bought more than they've sold. Their last surplus was back in 1975, and this was a cornerstone of Trump's campaign. He promised to impose tariffs to cut down America's deficit. He claimed it would bring back factory jobs to the United States. Well, it's been 10 months of tariffs and deals. And what's the verdict? Let me show you the official numbers from the US government. The goods deficit in 2025 was $1.24 trillion. That's around 2% higher than the previous year. The deficit was higher than the year before. It's also the highest deficit since 1960. So Trump's claim is absolutely false. The US deficit did not fall by 78%, as he put it. It, in fact, rose by 2%. And just to be clear, we have no idea where Trump got that number from. But one thing's for sure, his grand tariff plan is not working. Not in the market, and now not in the court of law. Tariffs were supposed to curb American imports, yet imports are up in the US by 4.7%. Americans imported goods worth $4.3 trillion last year. But the silver lining is the exports. American exports did rise. They rose by 6.2% last year. The problem is this is not translating into jobs. Trump's tariff plan had 2 objectives. One was to reduce the deficit, and the second was to bring back American jobs. But right now, the opposite is happening. American manufacturers cut 80,000 jobs last year. So to recap, the deficit is at a historic high, and the jobs are being cut. Then what did Trump's tariffs achieve? They have shaken up America's import mix. Basically, the share of each country in US imports, that has changed. The deficit with China has tumbled from $295 billion in 2024 to $202 billion last year. That's a 26% drop in America's deficit with China. Similarly, the deficit with Europe is down by 7%. But with other major producers, the deficit has widened, almost 44% with Vietnam, 14% with Mexico, almost 97% with Taiwan, and around 28% with India. That's right. America's trade deficit with India widened last year by 28%. And that means 2 things. One, the China-US trade relationship is degrading fast. Imports from China were down almost 30% last year. That's the lowest level since 2009. Unless there is a deal, this trend will accelerate, and we don't know what happens to deals now in the wake of the US Supreme Court ruling. So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. And we saw this, in fact, during Trump's first term as well. His tariffs on China led to opportunities elsewhere. Countries like Vietnam and Thailand emerged as alternative hubs. This time, though, there is another concern, and that's point number 2. If deficits are the problem, Trump may go after these countries next. He's already imposed 20% tariffs on Southeast Asian nations. Those tariffs have been declared illegal today, but we'll have to wait and see what strategy the White House comes up with. Will they stick to their guns, or will they agree with what the Supreme Court has said? And the US is running a massive deficit with these countries. So these countries could have a target on their back, irrespective of today's court order. And that also includes India, by the way. For all we know, we could be stuck in a cycle. When China's surplus rises, Trump tariffs them. When India's surplus rises, he tariffs us. When Vietnam's surplus rises, the same thing happens. The question is, how do we exit this cycle? Well, the court ruling today gives hope, but this will be fixed if common sense prevails. No country can produce everything in the world. It's simply not possible. Also, a trade deficit is not automatically bad. It often reflects your country's affluence. Wages in America are 5 times higher than wages in China. So naturally, making in China will be cheaper. This is not some grand conspiracy against the US. This is how economics works. Unless Donald Trump acknowledges that, the problem will get worse. The immediate thing to see would be how the standoff with the Supreme Court plays out and how Donald Trump responds to today's ruling. The US Supreme Court, like we said, has said that Trump's tariffs are illegal. 6 out of 9 judges have ruled that the tariffs are in violation of the federal law.
So there you have it. Supreme Court has ruled against Donald Trump, which is going to impose his ability to actually negotiate and bargain on behalf of the country. Now, I don't know why they would do this. I guess their point is certain branches of government have certain authorities, and Congress has the authority to implement trade tariffs on other countries. That's their sort of allotted authority. Trump was using a particular clause under an emergency act to usurp Congress's authority to implement the tariffs. So when he did that, based on his interpretation of the law, it caused the issue now to be brought forth to the Supreme Court, and they had to determine whether or not it was permissible for him to use that tactic to usurp Congress's authority. The arguments was made in court. Apparently, the majority of the justices did not feel that the Trump administration made a valid reason for why they used that particular clause to usurp Congress's authority, and they now sort of shifted the ball back into Congress, saying you cannot usurp their authority, so all the tariffs that you've applied, since it didn't come through their delegated authority for you to do that, are null and void, I guess. So to me, it seems like since Trump currently controls both branches of government, he's a very popular Republican leader, he just got to get all of them to agree to give him the authority to act in the manner that he's acting. The question is, will they actually delegate that authority to him? To me, I think it makes sense for the Republicans to do so. I mean, he's been getting results, right? He's getting billions of dollars of tariff funding coming in. He's using it as a useful tool to stop wars and to get countries to come to the table. This is a way to kind of allow him to continue to use that as a negotiating tool for him to sort of bargain on behalf of the country. The question is, does anyone ever want to give up power? would Congress, now that they know that this is a power that they yield, would they relinquish that to Trump? Now, his party's in power right now, so if everybody was on board, they should. But I think the problem is going to be whether or not Trump can get every one of those Republican senators and congressmen to actually agree to give him that power. And I think there's a few defectors that would potentially stop it, because there's small margins in the House. I think he's only got maybe 1 or 2 votes in the House that means everyone would have to agree, and there are guys that don't agree. There's a couple of congressmen that are not big, who are Republicans, that don't support virtually anything that Trump does. So if they don't agree, then it doesn't go from the House, and then the senators would all have to agree, which also is tough now, because I don't know that they would. He may be able to get J.D. Vance to be the tiebreaker vote in the Senate, provided that they agree. So now Trump has to do some diplomacy right now. He's got to get his party members on board and say, look, here's all the things we've been doing. Here's how they've been working. Here's why I need you to actually delegate the authority to me for this period of time until we can accomplish this objective. And when we accomplish this objective, I'll relinquish the power back. And there could be a timeline on the power. And then it goes into effect. Now, he does already have trade agreements with each of the countries. So that is something he can bring back to Congress and say, hey, look, here's what me using this authority has yielded. And so we now have more fair trade arrangements with these countries. And now we can continue to build off of this progress if you guys continue to grant me the authority to act in this way. The question is, can you ever get politicians to agree? That's the uphill climb. We'll see what happens, but you're approaching a midterm, and this shift of power has changed in this manner. This is a major news. So we'll see how it all plays out, but I did want to share the breaking news with you guys who are joining me. We'll keep you guys posted as we learn more. If you're not already connected to the Inner Core Show, please go ahead, like and subscribe. Stay connected, join the conversation, and weigh in. What do you think about this decision? Is it something that essentially undo Trump's whole presidency for this term? Is this now take his leverage away? And does this now mean that he has to unwind and the government owes all the people they collected tariffs from that money back? That remains to be seen. And if so, what does that then do to our debt? Does it increase our debt by far more? And what then can we do now that we don't have the ability to implement tariffs on other countries? What can we now do about the tariffs they implement on us? So there's a lot of moving pieces, but you guys weigh in, tell me your thoughts. All right. Thank you for joining me. We'll keep you guys posted as we get more information. All right, bye.